The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 7 minutes and 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 7 minutes. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 6 minutes and 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 6 minutes. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 5 minutes and 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 5 minutes. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 4 minutes. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 2 minutes and 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 2 minutes. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 1 minute and 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return in 1 minute. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 45 seconds.
Hey, Sean, we still...
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 30 seconds.
Yeah, just doing a quick mic check. 1, 2, 3. 4,
Yeah,
5.
you're fine.
Okay, I heard a little buzz. All right.
05, 38, 39, 40.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 15 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 5 seconds.
He's not just a conservative voice at CNN. He's the last man standing athwart the leftist mob, delivering the fiery truth, surrounded, outnumbered, still undefeated. Fighting for free speech, Western civilization, and delivering common sense for the American people. Ladies and gentlemen, here's Scott Jennings.
For the American people. It's the Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network. Great show for you today. We continue to get into the details and investigate what went on last week in Utah. At 22 minutes past the hour, Curtis Houck of the Media Research Center will join us. And we're going to discuss the, frankly, insane media behavior in the wake of the assassination of Charlie. As you might imagine, a lot of folks in the mainstream media have been a total mess in trying to discuss and talk about this story. At 33 minutes, Andrew Colvett, close friend and business partner of Charlie Kirk, spokesperson for Turning Point USA, and my friend, he's going to join us to discuss what happens next for Charlie Kirk's organization. But first, let's get to the news. The investigation into the Charlie Kirk assassination continues. More evidence is expected to be revealed soon, perhaps as soon as tomorrow, about the radicalization of the shooter, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson. Today, we're learning that DNA evidence collected matches that of the shooter, and we're also learning that he is not cooperating with investigators at the moment. The FBI director, Kash Patel, appeared on Fox News this morning and says the shooter wrote a note prior to the killing.
The suspect wrote a note saying, I have the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk and I'm going to take it. That note was written before the shooting. Evidence of its existence, we now have learned, existed before the shooting, was in the location in the suspect and partner's home. But we have since learned that the note, even though it has been destroyed, we have found forensic evidence of the note, and we have confirmed what that note says because of our aggressive interview posture at the FBI.
That's the director of the FBI, Kash Patel. He also says that based on their interviews of Robinson's family, the shooter's politics and motivations are pretty clear. Let's hear that.
And that's what I'm going to do. His family has collectively told investigators that he subscribed to left-wing ideology, and even more so in these last couple of years. And he had a text message exchange, he, the suspect, with another individual, in which he claimed that he had an opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk, and he was going to do it because of his hatred for what Charlie stood for.
One more thing. The FBI is apparently investigating 7 different social media accounts for appearing to have foreknowledge of the Kirk assassination. The posts appear to be discussing Kirk being killed on September the 10th, which is what happened. And we'll see if that leads anywhere, but hopefully anyone involved in this or who knew about it and did nothing or said nothing is found and brought to justice. In the wake of the killing, a great many progressives are taking to the internet to express their pleasure or approval of the murder. Many of them are being fired. Some of them are in the media. We'll talk more about that at 22 minutes past the hour today with Curtis Houck from the Media Research Center. Also in Utah, 2 men have been arrested for allegedly planting a bomb underneath a news van on Friday. Here are their names: Adib Nasir, age 58, and Adil Justice Ahmed Nasir, age 31. They were arrested on Sunday in Magna, Utah, less than an hour away from the site of the Charlie Kirk murder. President Trump made quite a lot of news this morning in a series of pronouncements. First, he says there's a deal with China on the future of TikTok, the social media app that Congress banned but has somehow remained alive. Let's hear from the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, about that.
We have a framework for a TikTok deal. The 2 leaders, President Trump and Party Chair Xi, will speak on Friday to complete the deal, but we do have a framework for a deal with TikTok.
Still a raging debate in America about TikTok and whether it's good for our country or not. The president also said this morning that he wants to change the rules about how companies report to the SEC. He wants companies to move from quarterly financial reports to sending them every 6 months. This would be aimed at combating short-term thinking inside the C-suite, trying to shift businesses and their culture to longer-term thinking and planning. This is the Scott Jennings Show, common sense for the American people. You're listening live on the Salem Radio Network. Let me talk to you about an important issue regarding Congress. Now, as you know, back in July, Congress approved the One Big Beautiful Bill. It was a defining victory for President Trump and the American people, but that win is now at risk unless Congress acts before the end of this year. A massive healthcare tax increase will hit millions of Americans. Now, there's an organization called Americans for a Balanced Budget. They are sounding the alarm. Key healthcare tax credits will expire on December 31st. And if they lapse, 24 million Americans could face skyrocketing healthcare costs. Millions of people may lose coverage entirely. Rural communities would be hit especially hard, with job losses, fewer providers, and reduced access to care. Congress must act this year to protect these vital healthcare tax credits. It has to do with Americans who buy their own health insurance. President Trump's own pollster found that 77% of voters, including over 70% of Trump supporters, are more likely to vote for candidates who preserve these credits. Americans for a Balanced Budget is calling on Congress to keep the full promise of the One Big Beautiful Bill by stopping these devastating healthcare tax increases before the end of the year. Your voice counts. You can visit stophealthcosthikes.com. That's healthcosthikes.com. And you can tell Congress to act now, protect the credits, and prevent higher health care costs. Other news today, Secretary of State Marco Rubio is in Israel, reaffirming the alliance that the United States has with the Jewish state. He held a press conference with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Marco Rubio had this to say.
We are focused on what happens now, what happens next, what role can Qatar play possibly in reaching an outcome here that leads not just to the end of this hostilities, not just to the release of all of the hostages, both living and deceased, not just the disarmament and elimination of Hamas, but also a better future for the people of Gaza, which isn't possible as long as Hamas exists, which isn't possible as long as 48 hostages are being held. And so we're going to continue to encourage Qatar to play a constructive role in that regard.
Marco Rubio said the United States is still interested in a peace settlement, but he added, and I want to quote the Secretary of State, Hamas is a terrorist group, a barbaric group whose stated mission is the destruction of the Jewish state. So we're not counting on that happening. That's Marco Rubio referring to the idea that there could be a diplomatic solution. It's Scott Jennings on the Salem Radio Network. Let me ask you a question. Do you ever catch yourself thinking, I guess this is just how life is going to be? You wake up stiff, your back hurts. Simple things like getting out of a chair, maybe picking something up off the floor, start to feel like a chore. Weighs on your mind, I bet, if that's how your life is. Little by little, pain becomes your new normal. But let me tell you, it does not have to be that way. Relief Factor is 100% drug-free, and it targets the inflammation that causes pain so that you can move better and feel better and actually get your life back. Just ask Kim, who is a real Relief Factor customer. She writes in and says, quote, after just one day, I could tell the difference. After day 2, I woke up crying, tears of joy, because I didn't have any pain. I haven't been able to do my own lawn in years, and now I can. Now, over in the Scott Jennings household, we are using Relief Factor. I'm going to be honest with you. I got a little issue in my right knee. I had some knee surgery a few years ago, a little bit of swelling, a little bit of pain. I take Relief Factor. Really seems to be targeting that area and helping me out. So take it from me. It works. You do not have to settle for living in pain. You can try Relief Factor's 3-week quick start. It's just $19.95. Visit relieffactor.com or call 1-800-4RELIEF. And that's how you get in touch with the folks at Relief Factor, because daily pain does not have to be your new normal. Coming up after this next commercial break, we're going to talk to our friend Curtis Houck from the Media Research Center. As you can imagine, several people in the mainstream media have disgraced themselves in the wake of the Charlie Kirk assassination. We're going to go over that. And at 33 minutes past the hour, Charlie Kirk's close friend, Andrew Colvett, joins the show. It's Common Sense for the American People. Scott Jennings on the Salem Radio Network.
Portions of the Scott Jennings Show are sponsored in part by Americans for Prosperity.
Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 4 minutes.
All I want is a remedy for all of the things that are me. Ooh, I will take a look. Please.
Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
Baby, why you dye your hair? Why you always
Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes.
Tell me, did the other jumpers going on you? If I come on like a dream, ooh, will you let me show you what I mean? Will you let me come?
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
All I want is a remedy for all of the things that we I could only take a to please
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 2 minutes. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 1 minute and 30 seconds.
I need a remedy, yeah, for what is enemy, you see. I need a remedy for what is enemy. I need a remedy, yeah, for what's enemy. If I only had a remedy.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return in 1 minute. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 45 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 15 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 5 seconds.
Straight talk without the bluster. When you positively need the truth, this is where you come. The Scott Jennings Show.
It's Monday, September the 15th. It's the Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network. Discussing the aftermath of the political assassination of Charlie Kirk. And I really want to congratulate and thank Vice President Vance for a couple of amazing hours on the Salem Radio Network. He just finished up the Charlie Kirk show guest hosting and did a great job and had many people coming by from the White House. So I encourage you, if you missed it, to look up their archive stream on that. It was a really good conversation with a lot of great people. My next guest is Curtis Houck from the Media Research Center. Curtis, thanks for joining us here on the Scott Jennings Show. We have a lot to talk about today, my friend, because your job is to track what's going on in the media and what they're doing to beclown themselves on a daily basis. And of course, many have in the wake of this horrific killing of Charlie. I'll start with this story of this columnist, Karen Attiah from the Washington Post. She's been fired by the Washington Post and now is not happy about it. Curtis, thanks for joining us. Tell us what did Karen do and what has been the response?
Yeah. Karen Attiah, the global opinions editor for the Washington Post until a few hours ago, she was fired in part for taking Charlie Kirk out of context. She claimed he said black women do not have the the power processing to be taken seriously. You have to go steal a white person's seat. Of course, that was taken out of context. It was Charlie facetiously talking about prominent Black Democrats, Joy Reid, Ketanji Brown Jackson, Michelle Obama. That soundbite was from Sheila Jackson Lee, the late congresswoman that he was mocking, in which they all admitted that they were there in part because of affirmative action. So he was taking issue with people admitting or trying to suggest that they weren't qualified for the positions that they were placed. So she was let go for that. But she claims that she was silenced for doing her job, which I think is just hilarious. And of course, in her Substack, she has a picture of herself dressed like the Statue of Liberty under the caption, "Democracy dies in darkness, but some of us will still carry on the light."
I've noticed, Curtis, that in other cases, what's happening with Charlie is that quotes are being made up, quotes are being misattributed to him, or quotes are being selectively edited to try to create a narrative about Charlie. But then you dig into it for 5 seconds and you realize it's just not true. The New York Times, I think, had to run a correction because they ran a quote calling Charlie an anti-Semite. And it turns out that the quote was not actually true. It was from somebody else. I mean, why do you think that is? Why do you think media outlets are having such a hard time quoting this man accurately? I mean, Charlie Kirk is not hard to find. Charlie was out there. He was on video. He had a radio show every day. If you wanted to quote him correctly, you could, but there's obviously a concerted effort on the left and in media right now to misquote or make up quotes from Charlie. Why are they doing this to themselves? They know we're going to figure it out, don't they?
He was quoting an anti-Semite as a way then to take them down and talk about why they were wrong. You know, as a radio host, he was reading what they said so then he could address it. I mean, New York Times reporters do that in their stories all the time. They quote things they find odious and then they chop it down. I mean, it's so disrespectful, and it goes to show the lack of trust in the press that they have, that they cannot even quote a man correctly. And you wonder, so many people touch these stories. You know this, Scott, in the media. A lot of people are involved. A lot of cooks are in the kitchen. So to deliberately misquote him like this, you just wonder, are you just that out of tune with that side of the aisle? Or was there a nefarious purpose afoot? And without proper explanation, you're not going to know. So people are asking those questions.
We got about a minute left here, Curtis. The other one I wanted to discuss was this guy named Jonathan Chait, who writes for The Atlantic, who tweeted over the weekend, "Conservatives hunted for Democrats endorsing Charlie Kirk's murder. They found none. Instead, they created an alternate world in which it was so." I mean, to your question, is Jonathan Chait not familiar with the internet? I mean, you spend more than 10 seconds on the internet this week, and you could certainly find Democrats who were celebrating Charlie Kirk's murder, laughing about it. Blue sky was awash in this. I mean, I'll give you the last word here, Curtis, in 20 seconds, but why are they so oblivious to this?
Jonathan Chait is one of the OG liberal online types, Scott. I think I would say this. And Charlie, I think, would be in support of this because he understands that there's a difference between being somebody completely anonymous, being a forward-facing person like a teacher, or the third category, a for-profit, nonprofit, where people can be fired for cause.
Yeah.
And celebrating someone's death, that I think a lot of people would agree is a line that we can all agree shouldn't be crossed.
Curtis Houck, thanks for joining us. Andrew Colvitt comes next. Stay with us on the Scott Jennings Show. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 5 minutes.
I've been lied to. I don't know why I let that mean woman make me a fool. She took all my money
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 30 seconds.
Now she's with one of my good time buddies. They're drinking in some crosstown bar. Sometimes I feel like I've been tied to the whipping post. Tied to the whipping post.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 4 minutes.
I feel like I'm dying.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
My friends tell me that I've been such a fool.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes.
Drown myself in sorrow as I look at what you've done. But nothing seems to change. The bad times stay the same, and I can't run. Sometimes I feel.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Good Lord, I feel like I'm dying.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 2 minutes. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 1 minute and 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return in 1 minute. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 45 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 15 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 5 seconds.
Fighting for free speech and Western civilization. This is the Scott Jennings Show.
It is Monday, September the 15th. Common sense for the American people here. It's Scott Jennings on the Salem Radio Network. This just into the Scott Jennings Show. Clemson University, yet another institution that's having to deal with insane employees following an immediate and deliberate investigation into inappropriate social media content. Clemson says they have terminated an employee due to social media posts in the wake of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And after being notified on Friday to stay out of the classroom, 2 faculty members have been removed from their teaching duties pending investigation for termination. So Clemson, the latest in another string of employers and institutions that are having to deal with employees who just cannot hold it together and keep their glee for political violence off the internet. My next guest, I'm very proud and glad to have Andrew Colvett with us. Andrew, first of all, thank you for everything you've been doing in the wake of what happened last week to your very close friend, Charlie Kirk. You are with Turning Point USA. You were Charlie's business partner. You were one of his very close friends. And so the enormous emotional toll this has taken on you, the pressure that has been on you to manage things in the wake of all this, I can't even begin to imagine it. So on behalf of conservatives everywhere, we just want to thank you personally and publicly for putting all this on your shoulders. We heard you on earlier today with Vice President Vance. He did a great job hosting the Charlie Kirk radio show. I thought I would just ask you a few questions. Number one, how are you doing with everything personally? How is the Kirk family doing? How is the organization, the family inside of Turning Point doing here a few days out from this horrific incident?
Well, thanks, Scott, and thanks for having me on your show and for those kind words. And how am I doing? I don't know. I don't know, Scott. And I think that we're putting one foot in front of the other right now, and we are doing the things that we know Charlie would have wanted us to do, and we're doing the things that and I really mean this. Organizational wide, we're doing the things that I feel like God is leading us to do, because there has been such an outpouring of the Holy Spirit on all of the staff and all of the people associated with our organization and that we're close to Charlie. And I do feel like God's covering over us and a supernatural amount of energy. I mean, I've slept like none at all in the last however many days, and somehow I don't feel tired. And I know that that's God sort of saying, keep moving, and you're doing what I'm calling you to do. And I was just so, thankful that the Vice President Vance wanted to do Charlie's show today. And so we quickly put the crew together, flew to DC and got it done. And I think JD just absolutely killed it. And he did such a great job. And that final monologue that he delivered, it was, the whole room was just riveted. And, even Tucker Carlson, who was a guest on the show today, came back just to listen to it. And he was just, his jaw hit the floor. And if you can do that to Tucker, I think that says a lot about what you've just communicated to the world.
Well, what was great about the show today was that the vice president knew Charlie Kirk, and he had people on who knew Charlie and who were saying true things about Charlie Kirk. And I have to tell you, Andrew, one of the things in the aftermath of this that has me, frankly, the angriest, and we just discussed it in the last segment, is the effort that is being made on the left to either misquote Charlie Kirk, to make up quotes that supposedly came from Charlie Kirk that did not, to pull things out of context. In other words, all of this effort is being made to distort or to create a narrative that just simply isn't true. And it may be too early yet for you to say, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Is Turning Point, is the Kirk family considering any kind of legal action against people who are defaming Charlie Kirk, the organization? I mean, it makes my blood boil, just to be honest with you. Charlie Kirk was not hard to find. There's a lot of hours of video of him, a lot of hours of radio of him. He said a lot of things that he said it most often on the record. And yet all this nonsense is being put out. What are your options when it comes to dealing with this?
Yeah, no, actually, Scott, I'm really glad you brought this up. I mean, just candidly, and I appreciate it. I've done a number of interviews in the last couple of days, and nobody has asked me about this stuff, I think, out of respect. I'm glad they didn't. I wasn't ready to talk about it. But, of course, I've seen some of the distortions, the outright lies, the slander against Charlie and what he said. And they even will cherry pick clips of his that I was there when they were recorded. And we used to laugh when Media Matters would take something he said out of context or frame it a certain way. And we would laugh that, Media Matters is doing our PR for us. And it was, I had tried for years to kind of argue with Media Matters, and it never went anywhere because it's not a journalistic entity. It is a propaganda entity. And so we just kind of took it in stride. And, now what they're doing, though, is they're looking back at like the way Media Matters would frame it. And they're trying to, act like that's what Charlie actually said. And so they'll take like a 5 or 10 words strung together and act like this was some big position of Charlie Kirk's. And it's so ridiculous. And absolutely, I mean, we have all of our friends out there on social media. They're sending us all this stuff. So just trust me, we are seeing it all. We are logging it all. And I'm not prepared to get ahead of ourselves or Erica or the organization. But I will say that we have really good lawyers. And, I completely agree with your sentiment that bad people intentionally lying and maligning the legacy of Charlie Kirk, who, by the way, Scott, was the most decent man I have ever worked with, the most truly good and generous and loyal and full of integrity man that I have ever worked with. He was one of those rare types that the more time you spent with him, the more endeared and the more to him you were, the more that you just loved the way he did things, and really just loved the man. He was truly one of a kind, and he was truly good inside and out. And I would just say that these people that never knew him, and they want to take a man that spent literally years and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of hours of footage, and they're going to try and parse one or two things he said and act like that was somehow the definition of a man, and not even give you the context, by the way, is just so dishonest and so gross, because they will take 0.001% of anything he said and ignore intentionally the 99.999% of things that he did and said. And, I listen, I don't think anybody's buying it. I don't want to give them more time than they deserve. But yes, Scott, we have good lawyers.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that because, look, as someone who is in the debating space partially for a living myself, as you just pointed out, when you're out there in the public sphere debating and putting hours and hours and hours of things on the record, anybody can go in and clip 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds,
Correct,
and twist it into something. And they know what drives me crazy is that they know they're doing it. And it's happening on the left.
Well, they're liars.
They're liars. And they do it to President Trump. They did it all during the campaign. I go back, the bloodbath thing that was completely, taken out of context. The dictator of for a day thing. They did it to him. Now they're doing it to Charlie. And look, Charlie's not here, to answer it individually. And so I think a lot of people out there are hoping that aggressive action is taken to push back on this. Now, the good news is there's so much stuff out there. And you can get it if you want it. And I think millions of people are getting it. And that's really where I want to go next with the conversation. I have heard you throw out some absolutely insane numbers that you all are getting at Turning Point USA. Thousands, tens of thousands of people asking to get involved, millions of new engagements on social media. What can you tell us about the explosive growth that's happening with Turning Point?
Yeah, and can I say one other thing about about these vile comments or these insinuations? Well, I mean, ask yourself, Scott, what are they insinuating? Are they insinuating that Charlie deserved to be assassinated? Like, what actually are they driving at? Because he said things you didn't like because you disagreed with him. Charlie Kirk never called anybody to violence. He was an anti-revolutionary. He did not want blood in the streets. He wanted revival. He wanted Jesus Christ come to earth and fill people's hearts so that you could have thriving families and thriving children and a country that was dedicated to the founders' ideals. And so anyways, I just, that they have gotten enough time. And I do want to talk about how amazing the outpouring and the vigils and the tributes to Charlie have been all across the world. And yeah, to your point, we have 900 college chapters. We have 1,200 high school chapters and kind of a revolving presence on about 3,500 total, right? We have gotten 37,000 inquiries of students that want to start a chapter, a TPUSA chapter. 37,000. It's just, we were already the biggest by chapters, conservative youth organization, and it's truly, truly incredible. And by the way, that number is probably expired now. It's probably over 40,000. I have no idea, but it truly is a testament to the man of who Charlie Kirk was and what his legacy is, and how he has truly inspired a whole new generation to take up his mantle, be courageous, speak the truth in love, and shove out it doesn't matter what the haters are going to say. It doesn't matter what the culture is saying. They're going to do it because Charlie showed them the way.
I hate to keep dwelling on this, but it just, I think it bears discussion. To answer your question, yes. There have obviously been people who have, at a minimum, insinuated that it was good that he was assassinated. At least they've said it wasn't bad. That's number one. Number two, this idea that he held views that were extreme or somehow out of the mainstream of American political thought. I listen to a lot of Charlie Kirk, and he was a conservative. He was a center-cut conservative who believed what millions of other people in this country believed, and who had an ability to articulate those beliefs. But what did Charlie Kirk talk about? He talked about his faith. He talked about being pro-life. He talked about, things that conservatives believe in and live their lives by. And it wasn't singular to him. Millions upon millions of people believe and have political beliefs that were in line with where Charlie was. So when I see these people saying these things, effectively what they're saying, Andrew, is, well, half the country is hateful. They're extremists. They're misogynists. They're racist. They're, whatever vile label has been put on incorrectly applied to Charlie Kirk. Well, what they're actually saying is that that's how they feel about half or more than half of the country in which they live.
Yeah, and you make a great point. Like oh my goodness, Charlie said something that actually there's only two genders. Oh, like as if that's not already an 80-20 issue in this country, and you're gonna be mad that he said something. By the way, Charlie and Scott, I'm gonna send you this clip after we get off, where Charlie is so kind and thoughtful to this student that came up and was talking about that they were transgender. And Scott, the amount of love and patience. This is what I want the audience to know. His clips that went viral so often were Charlie Kirk destroys liberal or whatever.
Yeah.
90% of his interactions on college campus, he was like a big brother, a patient, loving friend to these students. And he would listen and he would work out these thoughts and these bad ideas often with them, lives, the Socratic method. And he just loved them and he wanted the best for them.
Andrew,
and that's who I know he was.
Andrew, can you stick with us for another 5 minutes? I want to finish this conversation because you're saying things that everybody needs to hear. You're on the Salem Radio Network. I'm Scott Jennings. The voice you're hearing is Andrew Colvett, close friend of Charlie Kirk, business partner of Charlie Kirk. A lot more to talk about. Stay with us.
Common sense for the American people. This is the Scott Jennings Show.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 2 minutes and 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 2 minutes. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 1 minute and 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return in 1 minute. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 45 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 15 seconds. Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 5 seconds.
You've heard the narratives. Now get the truth. It's the Scott Jennings Show.
Monday, September the 15th. Andrew Colvett from Turning Point USA, close friend and business partner of Charlie Kirk, is our guest. Andrew, we'll get back to our conversation with you in just one moment. But first, I want to tell our listeners, if you want a wireless company you can brag about, the answer is clear. It's called Pure Talk Wireless. When you sign up with Pure Talk, you get a lot to brag about, whether it's what they do in the veterans community or what they do for you as a consumer. You get a 5G network that's insanely fast, dependable, and secure. $25 a month, unlimited talk, text, and plenty of data. It'll save the average family over $1,000 a year. My advice, switch to my wireless company, Pure Talk. Here's how you do it. You just dial pound 250 and say keyword Scott Jennings. That'll save you an additional 50% off your first month. Dial pound 250 and say Scott Jennings. Switch to Pure Talk. Their U.S.-based customer service team can get you switched over in as little as 10 minutes. Pure Talk Wireless service worth bragging about. It's the Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network. Andrew Colvett from Turning Point USA is our guest. Andrew, a little breaking news here into the Scott Jennings Show. University of Tennessee at Knoxville says they have taken swift action against a faculty member who has failed to meet expectations for civil engagement. Actions endorsing violence and murder do not represent the university or our values. The faculty member is out of the classroom, placed on administrative leave, and termination proceedings have begun. We are seeing this, Andrew, in college after college and business after business. What is your reaction to all of this? Are you stunned at the number of people who simply can't hold it together? They can't contain their glee for this assassination. It's wild.
No, Charlie was, I tell you, so much of this is God, Scott. Charlie's gift was to speak the truth in such an unvarnished, direct, powerful, no holds barred, no punches pulled kind of way that he would divide the wheat from the chaff. Like, it just happened. And he was, you couldn't ignore the things that he was saying. You could disagree with them, but there was no doubt that what he was saying was extraordinarily powerful. And so he was just, it's just par for the Charlie course, I guess is what I'm saying. I've just seen this so much, and I actually think it's wonderful, and I'll explain why. Because there's this argument, oh, they're cancel culture, what I thought you guys were pro free speech. And it's like, no, we are pro, yes, we are pro free speech. We are anti ghoulish behavior. We are anti vile behavior. And by the way, these employers that are firing these people that have said such disgusting things are exercising their freedom to say, we don't want to be associated with you if you're going to dance on the grave of somebody that was just assassinated. And good for them. And every single person on the internet that has been flagging these terrible, incidents, this terrible behavior, and this really evil behavior. I mean, let's just call it what it is. I just want to say thank you. I see you. We see you. Turning Point has not been spending our time dealing with that, but we see what so many of our friends and so many of these internet accounts are doing. And I would just say, keep it up. And until you get a formal decision from that organization of which way they want to go, if they're going to keep that person on staff, then we need to know that. If they're going to fire them, then we need to applaud them. And by the way, Scott, if this can be a purging moment for these schools and these universities and these, the judges, all of these, I mean, these are people that are supposed to serve the community in a nonpartisan way and say, listen, I'm going to apply justice equally. I'm going to teach your kids equally. And what they're showing to us is a mask-off moment that they will refuse to do their basic duty when called upon if they don't like your politics. So good riddance. We need to expose them. Let the demons flee.
I think, Andrew, we've got about a minute left here. I think that it's not that they just didn't like Charlie's politics. They hate, obviously, all mainstream conservative views. I think what they really hated was that he was allowed to speak, that he had the courage to show up and speak. I think what's at the core of some of this, honestly, is they just don't think people who are conservative should be allowed a public forum, and that Charlie was courageous enough to do it in places where conservatives aren't always welcome. That's what drove them mad, and now they're showing us their true colors. I give you the last 15 seconds, my friend Andrew Colvett.
Yeah, he wasn't supposed to be able to achieve the heights he did because he was an unashamed conservative. And he did it anyways by sheer force and by the grace of God. And you're right. That's why they hated him.
Andrew Colvett, close friend and business partner of Charlie Kirk. He is the spokesperson for Turning Point USA. You can find him on X. He's keeping the content flowing and keeping the organization moving for Turning Point USA and the memory of Charlie Kirk, and as we head towards Charlie's funeral this coming weekend. It's Common Sense for the American People. Join us again tomorrow. Scott Jennings is here on the Salem Radio Network.
The fastest growing show on syndicated radio. Welcome aboard. This is the Scott Jennings Show.